Act 1, Scene 2. So again, we are laying foundation blocks for this story. We will not be meeting Macbeth in this story, but we're going to hear an awful lot about him, about his prowess on the battlefield, about um, his fearlessness when it comes to blood and killing on behalf of the King of Scotland, on behalf of Scottish independence. So Scotland has been invaded by the Norwegian king, but also he has been aided by certain rebels like MacDonald and also the Thane of Cawdor. So we're going to hear about how Macbeth has addressed these rebels in the story, in this particular scene, and we're going to hear pretty much all of this through King Duncan's questioning of soldiers returning from the battlefield. Now, King Duncan is known as Worthy King Duncan or Gracious King Duncan. He has king becoming graces, which is an important quote for later, and he is adored by the people of Scotland. He is a very generous and very good king, and he loves Macbeth and supports Macbeth in everything he does. So this is the scene takes place at King Duncan's camp near Forres. Entering rather, King Duncan, Malcolm and Donalbain. Malcolm and Donalbain are his two sons. Importantly, Malcolm is born first, so that doesn't necessarily mean that he will succeed to the crown. He needs to be nominated by Duncan, but he is in theory first in line. Lennox, who is a courtier in the court with attendants, meeting a bleeding captain. So Duncan says, "What bloody man is this? He can report as seemeth by his plight of revolt the new estate. So who is this bleeding man coming towards us? What can he tell us about the battle?" Of course, in those days, we were depending on men to come on horseback to tell us the news of the battle. Malcolm says, "This is the sergeant who, like a good and hardy soldier, fought against my captivity. Hail, brave friend, say to the king the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leave it." Now, broil is generally a cooking term, but Shakespeare using the language here of this kind of like steamy, boiling, bloody event, setting the scene for a lot of bloodshed within this play. And the fact that the storyline is starting with the reference to a battle and to bloodshed on battlefield implies that many, many lives will be lost in this play. The captain says, telling his story of how things are going up in the north. "Doubtful it stood, as two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art, the merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel. For to that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him. From the western isles of cairns and gallow glasses is supplied, and fortune on his damned quarry smiling, like a rebel's whore. But all's too weak for brave Macbeth." Highlight that. All's too weak for brave Macbeth. Macbeth has some kind of like superhero status within Scotland at this moment. Nothing can defeat him. All's too weak for brave Macbeth. And well he deserves that name. Disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution. Highlight that. Brandished steel, of course, his sword, smoking with bloody execution. Like Valor's minion carved out his passage till he faced the slave. So if you want to insult someone in Shakespearean terms, you call them a slave. So he's talking there about how Macbeth took on the rebel MacDonald and took him on as a slave with his brandished steel, which was smoking of bloody execution. So very important quotations there. Macbeth is not afraid to kill. He's not afraid to use a sword. Now, in theory, he's on the right side of all of this because he's supporting his king and he's getting Scotland back for its own independence. But important to know that he's not afraid to use his weapon. And Valor's minion there, a lovely little simile, like Valor's minion. So Valor, of course, being strength, and minion, the servant of strength and bravery. "Which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him till he unseamed him from the nave to the chops and fixed his head upon our battlements." So when he met this rebel, he literally ripped him open and then he cut off his head and he stuck the head on the battlements to say, "I've been here and we have taken back this castle." So importantly, again, to reference the fact that Macbeth is no stranger to killing, no stranger to violence, and this is a bloody, bloody play. "O valiant cousin," this is Duncan, "O valiant cousin and worthy gentleman." Highlight that quotation as well. And definitely make sure you've highlighted the "unseamed him from the nave to the chops and fixed his head upon our battlements." It just shows so much about his ability and his prowess on the battlefield. So Duncan is revealing now that Macbeth is somehow related to him. He's this far out cousin. "And a worthy gentleman," Captain says. "As whence the sun gins his reflection, shipwrecking storms and direful thunders break." Again, reference to thunder as well, echoing what the witches said in the last scene. "So from that spring whence comfort seemed to come, discomfort swells. Mark, King of Scotland, mark. No sooner justice had with valour armed, compelled these skipping kerns to trust their heels." So basically, no sooner had he been victorious against one group, "but the Norwegian lord, surveying an advantage, with furnished arms and new supplies of men, began a fresh assault." So it happened again, and from some little nook somewhere, the Norwegian king saw an advantage and he came at Macbeth again. And Duncan says, "Dismayed not this our captains, Macbeth and Banquo? Did this not put them off?" Now, we haven't mentioned Banquo before, but he is a brother in arms with Macbeth. Captain says, "Ha, yes, a sparrow's eagles and hair to the lion." Very important there, highlighting the reference to animal imagery, because throughout this play you're going to see a lot of reference to animal imagery, so just put little A's when you see it. So he's saying, yeah, right, the Norwegian king is no match. He's like a sparrow to our eagle, Macbeth, or a hare to our lion. "If I say sooth, I must report that they were as cannons overcharged with double cracks." So they doubly redoubled stokes upon the foe. So they were just like cannons, going for it, and they were relentless with the King of Norway. "Except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds." So highlight that there as well, that phrase, reeking wounds. So everything is stinking and full of blood. Or memorize another, Golgotha. So that's another reference to a bloody scene, a bloody battle scene. "I cannot tell, but I am faint. My gashes cry for help." So this captain has come a long way. He's reporting his story, but he's bleeding profusely. He needs help. So, of course, he's being allowed to go off now, but he's reporting a certain section of the story and a certain section of Macbeth's victory to date. Duncan says, "So, well, thy words become thee as thy wounds. They smack of honour both. Get him to the surgeons." Then enter Ross and Angus, who are other servants and thanes within the court. "Who comes here?" The worthy Thane of Ross," says Malcolm. Lennox says, "What haste looks through his eyes? So should he look, that seems to speak things strange." "God save the king," says Ross. Duncan, "Whence camest thou, worthy Thane?" So where are you coming from? "From Fife, great king, where the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold. Norway himself, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor, began a dismal conflict, till that Bellana's bridegroom, lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons." So again, another example of how in another part of Scotland, in Fife, Macbeth has yet again been victorious, and he has beaten back the Norwegians yet again. And he's called here, highlight this, Bellana's bridegroom. So Bellana would have been the goddess of war in Roman time. So in this case, he's married to the goddess of war. So he is the god of war in a way. So he's Bellana's bridegroom. Those little quotations are so nice to see in an essay. We don't always have to see big lumpy quotes. Little ones that you can sew gently into an essay are very, very, very well received by the examiner. Lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell upon us. Duncan, great happiness. And Ross says, "That now, Swino, the Norway's king craves composition, nor would he deign him burial of his men, till he dispersed at St. Column's Inch $10,000 to our general release." So Macbeth refused to allow the King of Norway to bury his dead until he surrendered him €10,000 or $10,000 dollars, as it were. So a lot of money even now. Duncan, very important here. And for irony, there's going to be some ironic pieces, not to give too many spoilers away, but this is important. He says, "No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest." So never again will the Thane of Cawdor deceive me. Now he's going to order his death right now because he was helping with the rebels in Scotland and helping the king. But he is saying that the Thane of Cawdor, the title, he who bears the title of Thane of Cawdor, shall never deceive me again. Go pronounce his death, and with his former title greet Macbeth. So this is a promotion for Macbeth. Macbeth is now being given the title of Thane of Cawdor. Ross says, "I'll see it done." And Duncan says, "What he hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won."